to light. Great. And some of you might have heard earlier this morning when Dr. Darnisa Monte-Jackson talked about the importance of personal work, right? Like the work that we have to do on a personal and deep level. And if that sort of doesn't exist, we can't do that other work with the type of intention and meaning that it requires. So for each of these tools, so these tools that are in the yellow surrounding the Identity and Inclusion Center, for each of these tools, we've developed goals. And you can see that the goals have a personal action. That's really the work of the individual, right? So for the community building goal, the tool, the community building tool, the goal, there's a personal action piece. So what we're required as adults to sort of do in order to enact this and bring this to light. And then the work of the collective, right? What does that mean? What are the implications for teachers and classrooms? And then what does that mean and look like for kids? So for each of these goals, we have sort of the three stakeholders to think through. And I will put into the chat all of the tools with all of the goals attached, because that will support sort of the next piece of work that we'll do.
So we are going to share a video with you that we think gives you a really good overview of anti-bias education and digs deep into each of those tools. And we want you to be thinking of obviously your own work and your own practice. So as you're watching the video, we want you to be thinking about where you see this tool, let's say community building, let's say critical literacy happening in your practice and in your work, and then where do you see opportunities for growth in this area? We're going to then have time to dig into a Padlet where you'll share, and so we hope that we'll benefit from many different people's thinking and experiences through the Padlet by sharing where this is happening in your own practice and where you see opportunities for growth. If it helps you while you're watching the video, you can start your work on the Padlet just by clicking. I'll put the link in the chat. We'll also have some time after we watch the whole video to be able to, again, get right into that Padlet. Also, there is a password for the Padlet that I put right underneath in the chat. It's just ABE, Anti-Bias Education, in capitals.
And for some reason, it's not letting me upload a document for you all to get for some reason into this particular chat. So we'll have to figure out a way to get that to you all. It's not letting us upload it from the computer. So we want you to be able to see all of the goals. I'll figure out, if you actually don't mind while we have the video going, if you don't mind putting your emails into the chat, I can easily actually just email you this resource so that you have it. Can everybody hear? Yeah.
In our world today, we see systems of oppression at work on every level. Roots connected.
Do you want to make it bigger?
Yeah, I'll make it bigger, and also it seems like it's glitching for some reason. Let me just make it bigger for everybody.
Practices and deep community building with all stakeholders. The thinking and ideology that contributes to harmful acts of oppression.
Sorry, everyone. For some reason, it's not cooperating.
Education, a means for transforming communities. In our world today, we see systems of oppression at work on every level. Roots Connected believes that the best way to address these systems of oppression, both in schools and in society at large, is to start at the root. We look to target biased attitudes before they give way to acts of bias and discrimination. Through curriculum, classroom practices, and deep community building with all stakeholders in the school community. The goal is to identify and then dismantle the thinking and ideology that contributes to harmful acts of oppression, making anti-bias education a means for transforming communities. But what is anti-bias education and how do we implement it? In the context of a school, anti-bias education is more than a mere addition to an existing curriculum. It is an underpinning perspective and framework that permeates everything, including your interactions with children, families, and colleagues. Our work is holistic. It does not happen in one lesson or one day, but it is integrated throughout the curriculum and school environment. Anti-bias education, as we see it, calls for a dual process for change. While educators engage in the ongoing work of understanding their own biases, power, and positionality to effect a personal transformation, they are also committed to and affected by a collective transformation, taking place at the level of the institution. Anti-bias education is ultimately a path towards transforming our society into a more just, equitable, and connected one. Roots Connected has worked to deepen the definition of anti-bias education and to create a framework that encompasses what it looks like in schools. At the center of anti-bias education are inclusion and the studying and sharing of identity. Everything we do is based on these two fundamental beliefs. Individuals in school communities must have a deep and evolving understanding of their intersecting identifiers, must be able to recognize their personal biases and prejudices, as well as their power and positionality. Spaces must be created that foster a sense of belonging and allow students who enter to bring their authentic selves. Children thrive knowing that they will be recognized and affirmed for doing so. Centering identity work connects students to the curriculum in deep and meaningful ways. With identity and inclusion always at the center of anti-bias education, we can look towards various tools for helping us to implement anti-bias education in schools. What does community building look like in the context of anti-bias education? Community building is closely tied to the ongoing identity work being carried out by adults and children alike in the school setting. Community building involves creating brave spaces where children can take part in storytelling and forge connections across lines of difference. In a classroom where meaningful community building is taking place, students demonstrate self-awareness, confidence, family pride, and positive social identities. They recognize the value of honoring others' stories and perspectives. Teachers are intentional about setting norms that cultivate a safe and brave environment for open conversations. In action, community look like a teacher guiding 8th graders in working together to set clear and thoughtful classroom norms that guide their work. The norms that they set make space for them to be vulnerable in sharing their experiences and talking about their biases. As part of the community building process, students explore the tension between how they view themselves and how others view them, and how that tension impacts their experiences. Through genuine sharing and introspection, their community building work allows them to tap into experiences other than their own and to practice honoring others' stories. Anti-bias education involves actively creating opportunities to learn from those who identify in a variety of ways. We listen to their perspectives and experiences with the aim of building understanding and connection, informing and widening our own perspectives. We are ever mindful of the fact that we don't rest any group's experience or perspective on one single person. Instead, we seek to understand an experience from multiple perspectives. Through representation, teachers aim to build empathy in their students, who, when exposed to multiple perspectives and stories, will express comfort and joy with human diversity, use accurate language for human differences, and form deep, caring connections across all dimensions of human diversity. In action, representation could look like 3rd graders learning about Native people. During the course of the unit, teachers work to move beyond a tourist curriculum and spend time unpacking images and understanding how they tell a narrative of Indigenous people throughout history and in the present day. They avoid reducing an entire group to a single story by finding and listening to multiple perspectives and considering the nuances and intersectionality within communities. Children build empathy for the people around them when they are given an opportunity to understand their stories and experiences, and children feel empowered to bring their full, authentic selves into the classroom when they see themselves represented in the curriculum. Critical literacy in the classroom begins with teachers interrogating their own implicit biases and considering power, positionality, and perspective in reading the world around them. Teachers will foster in each student the capacity to critically identify bias in classroom texts and other resources by giving students the tools to question what they read, see, and hear. Through critical literacy, students recognize injustice and have language to describe what injustice looks like and the impact it has on people. In turn, students learn to look for power, positionality, and perspective in the texts that they read. In action, this could look like second grade students analyzing and challenging stereotypes in fairy tales. Second graders read texts and ask questions like, who is represented in this story? Or who is missing from this story? When young children are given language to question norms and understand the generalizations they see being made about various groups of people, they begin to push back on those generalizations in the classroom and in their social worlds as well. They are able to deconstruct unjust ideas and begin to reconstruct the world they want to see. When children are given the tools to think critically about their surroundings, they are able to dispute systems of power that are oppressive. Critical literacy encourages reflection, transformation, and action in children as they eagerly work to promote a more just and equitable world. A core goal of anti-bias education is to empower children to become active agents of change, to realize that their actions, big or small, have the power to transform interactions as well as systems and structures. Through anti-bias education, teachers expose students to various forms of action and cultivate each student's ability to stand up for oneself and for others in the face of bias and injustice. Through learning about social actions, students understand that they can stand up against discriminatory words or actions in a variety of ways to make a change. In action, this could look like a kindergarten class inviting each student's family into the room to share about themselves. Kindergartners build connections through direct experiences, learning about each other's families, and seeing how each family answers the same questions. Students are struck by the way that the families they see represented in the TV shows they watch don't match the diversity of the families in their lives, and they write letters to large TV networks to ask for more diversity and inclusion in TV. Children have an innate desire to create positive change in their communities and in the world at large. They have a keen sense of justice and want for things around them to be just and fair. As educators, we must nurture that inclination in children by allowing them to take part in actions small or large that lead to transformation. Through the lens of universal design for learning, educators will cultivate each student's understanding of themselves as learners by creating choice and access throughout the curriculum and in the physical space of the classroom. Through UDL, students understand that each person learns in different ways, and they're able to make informed choices for their learning and social emotional development. At best, UDL allows students to make a plan for their learning because the goal of their work is clear, and they have the means to achieve that goal. Through UDL, students see themselves as members of an interdependent community. We want students to see their success and liberation as tied to their peers, not in competition with them. They use the space to discuss things that they're seeing or hearing about in the world around them. Students preview the topics available to them, and knowing that they will be studying the topic that they choose for a certain amount of time, they think about what they need, given how they are feeling and experiencing everything going on around them. Being able to preview and being given context allows students to make an informed decision about what topic to focus on and generates higher engagement. Students practice a certain set of skills over multiple days that will help them to read media critically, and they do so by reading about a topic that interests them. If children cannot access curriculum, it does not matter how well thought out it may be, it will not serve them. Implementing universal design for learning informs how students are grouped, options for learning, and developing empathy for others. It helps to ensure our classrooms are safe spaces for kids to take risks, academically and socially, when we subscribe to the belief that there is no average. Access to learning ceases to be a barrier to understanding, growth, and building community. Anti-bias education at Roots Connected is centered in identity and inclusion. It is through the tools of critical literacy, UDL, social action, representation, and community building that we work towards our desired outcome of personal and collective transformation. We witness this dual transformation through a shift in culture and attitudes, as well as a shift in the work around curriculum, instruction, and professional development being done in school communities. By implementing an anti-bias framework in our school communities, we promote a deeper understanding in children of both the joy and the pain that exist in our world, and we provide students with strategies and tools for transforming our society into a more just, equitable, and connected one.
Okay, so we hope that gave you a solid overview of anti-bias education, of the components of the anti-bias education. And now we would love for you to do some thinking again about how the components are used in your own practice, and places that you might see opportunities for growth for one of the components. You can just click on the Padlet link in the chat and it should open right up for you with the I'm trying to say code word, but it's not code word, password, ABE, all in capitals. And we'll share our screen so we can sort of benefit from watching everybody's thinking.
Can you place that link back in the chat again? I know it's up higher.
Sure can. 1 second.
We also sent the goals, all of them written out, to your emails. So sorry about that, but that is in your emails in case that's helpful to refer back to. And we'll take about 3 or 4 minutes to just jot some things down so we can also learn about what's happening in other spaces. Then we'll make some space for questions and answers and thoughts.
And there it is. There is the link. We're going to take about 2 more minutes on the Padlet. Make sure you scroll kind of to the right or left so that you can see all of the components. And if you have added, just make sure you read the thinking of your colleagues. All right, so thank you for doing some thinking and sharing your thinking and your work with us. We love to learn from our participants, and we would love to just open up for any questions that you have about anti-bias education, about the goals or components.
I think one of the things that we saw in here around spaces to grow is the challenge for community building in large settings. And I think where we've seen the most impact has been really like the deep community building that happens in the classroom or in smaller groups, even in professional development, right? So in schools that happen to have staff equity groups that lead this work for their faculty, or the school leaders that lead it, just making the space in small groups to just share parts of who you are as a person, the power of storytelling, the power of sharing and understanding like what our own like power, positionality, our biases are. Again, those being in smaller spaces, we have found has actually been the most impactful in order for it to really take root.
Chloe, I think you had a question.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, I was just gonna unmute myself. Thanks y'all so much. Yeah, I wanted to, I guess, just hopefully I form a question and don't just share a thought. But in connection with the naming of power and positionality, I was just wondering if you could share more examples of that. I'm coming from the perspective of being an evaluator and always thinking through from our perspective when we're partnering with the school community, or if we're partnering with a client, whoever that might be, school district, just naming the positionality of ourselves as researcher and kind of evaluator, what that can mean, what weight comes along with kind of like the ideas of like objectivity or externality that we bring along. So I was just connecting to that idea of like naming power and positionality, and I don't know if you have any examples of how that's been done with your own school community in relation to maybe like external partnerships or cases like mine, or just any other examples would be great.
I think sort of the key to understanding that dynamic and kind of getting in front of all the stickiness that comes with that is positioning ourselves as listeners and outsiders, naming that there is the power dynamic present, and that we can only know what is told to us by people who are part of that community, and that we'll do our best to be really good listeners and ask questions. And I find that sort of like the naming of that position is super important. And then like really training ourselves to listen is really important.
Thank you.
I think just the ongoing work as well, right? That there's consistency in making space to build community, but also to have conversations around like bias, power, positionality, that it's not just the, in summer PD, we did this. I remember a training we did once. It's something we hear so often from schools that like, I think we did this once in the summer, but I think even that like consistency and the cadence is another way to sort of like assess if the work is even happening. For those who shared some things that are happening at their sites that are connected to these goals, we'd love to sort of hear what incredible work is happening, or where you feel stuck and might need a thought partner to think through some pieces. Or if there was anything surprising or different from those goals, or things you've seen differently that you'd like to share.
I could just add, and maybe this could be a good, just I guess a suggestion as well. So we're in the midst of doing leadership subgroups of how to bring PD. And I know we've been in person, we're half day, half boarding high school. And one of the things that we've talked about to present for the summer, and pretty much it's like, we don't want summer work. People are exhausted, teachers are exhausted. But how can we bring, I guess, suggestions of how can we have the education piece? Because I think there are, when we talk about the anti-biases and our own internal biases within ourselves, I think we struggle as a school to bring the actual DI work, or in general, just bringing that into the forefront. Is I think there's, again, with the Instagram that our school developed, and some teachers are nervous, or, maybe they might have been called out. One of the things I think for me is like, yes, our work is never done, but how do we incorporate that with PD, that almost it's like it should be voluntary for teachers? Because I think we all need breaks. I think that's just the gist of this year. But how do we make it available that it's not, for some, not necessarily quote unquote, oh, well, it's a burden, or I need to do more work, or this or that. Like, how can, like, as part of the committee this year, is just trying to figure out how can we make it available that it is also a suggestion, but also an encouragement in a way.
I think that's something that like every organization is struggling with right now. And I think we try to think about like what works for children generally works for grown-ups. And so that idea that we've centered with kids, as we are someplace that really prioritizes giving kids the tools they need to be able to engage with current events. And the current events of our time are so heavy, and that can really take over a classroom, and how we create balance between digging into that really heavy stuff and centering joy at the same time, and centering joy as part of resistance, and seeing joy as part of resistance, and learning tools for joy. And can we think about how to bring that to adults and to faculty as this work is so hard. And I think we've all been through 18 months that we weren't prepared for, weren't expecting, but also have learned a lot from. So I think that balance is so important, and people really believing that there is going to be space for joy as we continue to do the really hard work.
I always talk about this idea of connecting to the why. So anytime there is a PD or a space that you're creating, really connecting to like, why are we coming together? Why is it imperative to talk about these issues? Like, why does it matter in like our work as educators? If we really see ourselves as activists in our classrooms, like, why does it matter that we're in this ongoing work? So I think oftentimes linking, like, it's very easy to just go into a PD and be like, oh, this is something else I have to do, but making that PD feel impactful and purposeful and connecting to a why. I think at least the educators I've spoken to, they see that, right? They see themselves as, like agents of change in the classroom potentially, right? And so like arming them with the tools and the language and the work to do that. We also found that like book clubs, but like book clubs that have that are also like restorative. I don't know. I mean, this is Allie's favorite book, so I don't know if you want to talk about it, Allie, but there's the Valerie Kaur book, See No Stranger, and it's about revolutionary love. And it talks about how we love one another, how we love our opponents, and how we love ourselves. And so it's very connected to the work of like anti-bias, anti-racist work, but it's sort of done in this way around like also so meaningful around taking care of ourselves as well in these like meaningful ways when we're so exhausted, you know?
And I think choice is really, really big when people are experiencing burnout. So that idea of book club, but I could think of a lot of different structures where people are not choosing to opt in or out, but choosing how they engage and with what, and being really, I think we're working on recognizing that people need different avenues dependent on their identity and what they're experiencing. Um, and to be very, very aware of that.
I think we have a question. Do you have any advice for people trying to do this work in environments that are very hostile to it?
Get out. No. I think that people have preconceived notions of what it means to like do this work. And I think you have to dig into the root cause of why people are having like that gut reaction of like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to talk about it. Where is that coming from in your culture? And from who? So to be very direct, if that feeling is coming from white folks, I would think very differently than if that feeling is coming from people of color. If the feeling is coming from people of color, I would guess that there isn't a feeling of safety in the community, and I would be deeply, deeply concerned about that. And if it's coming from white folks, then I think you have to give out texts like white fragility and have them dig into their own work to get past that. White parents and policy makers and the school board.
I think this connects again to that work that Lee and Darnisa talked about at the beginning of the conference, right? The work of like doing like our understanding and recognizing why this work is urgent takes a level of like real commitment to learning, right? And once you learn that, it's very hard to unlearn it. So I wonder if it's like spaces of, if there's again, I agree with Allie that like there has to be an understanding of the root cause. It's like, what is it that is the block? And then I think this idea of we want to sort of jump into things and as like have a DI director right away and just sort of like pass things like that is very common. But what we want to try to do is like move really slow, which feels uncomfortable because this work is so urgent, but that really like taking the time to do the unlearning and to do the relearning and starting to understand the urgency of the work in a way that like can then start to create like larger impact. But I think that root cause piece is really critical, and this comes up a lot.
Yeah, I think we're often as humans trying to solve problems without understanding the root cause, and then we're like solving a different problem. So I don't like from Ruth who's saying it's coming from leadership. That's really difficult, and I think some questions need to be asked. And the question askers, I think we have to figure out who is the best person to ask those questions of that leader, because people can hear from specific people and not others when they're resistant. And then from white parents, I think it's the same thing. It's like, what is the block? What are they fearful of? And usually it's fearful of losing power. And there are a lot of texts that can help white people like sort of examine that in a real way. And I think that's imperative to require white folks to do.
I think the other thing that we've found really important is that this work, if it is to take hold in an intentional way, it actually has to be centered in it has to be the lens for every possible thing, not just for one piece, right? Or like this one day or this one initiative we're going to do, but that it's really integrated into all parts of it. Yeah. And honestly, I'm so glad you brought the rides equity improvement cycle. There's so much. We've known Lee for a really long time, and he's visited Community Roots a lot of times too. But there's so much in that cycle that like is so true about how change needs to occur. And so I think that's the piece that it has to be central, and it's hard. Some things have to give for that to be centered, you know.
And then again, like thinking about who the resistant white people can hear from, like maybe Brene Brown. Resistant white people like to hear from Brene Brown.
That's true. I think they're going to probably kick us off soon, but we just wanted to say thank you and allowing us just a small amount of your time to just even be with you all. So we appreciate you, those that we can see and that we can't see, but we appreciate you, and stay connected to us. If you know, I sent over our website, the video a lot of you asked is on there, and we sort of like share about our programming through our social media as well. So we look forward to continuing to stay connected with you all.
Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. We still have about a minute, which means we really have 2 minutes because they'll give us the little.
My goodness, sorry, we did too soon.
So no, that's fine. We'll definitely appreciate it. So many different ways and directions we can kind of take this, and I'm still trying to like process all of this as well too. So we definitely appreciate you sharing the resources, and I know I'm planning on going back and looking at some of those as well too. I definitely appreciate the book. I have my my Amazon card up already, and I already typed in "See No Stranger" to add to my list of summer reading as well too. So definitely
this one for those it's a great one. It's a good summer reading, and she's done a number of talks as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
She does. Yes, the Revolutionary Love Project is a good resource for sure.
It's missing so much, right? The space of talking about love is missing so much in these conversations, and it's so critical to actually like this work taking hold. And I saw someone said definitely. We do a number of we do like PD workshops that we offer throughout the year, but we also do institutes that are like short conferences that we host in non-COVID times at our learning site. So it's really great because you can sort of do theory and practice and be in classrooms. And then our larger work is really like doing one-on-one coaching with schools or districts to center this work. So we would love to hear from anybody, and just stay in touch with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Bye.
Thank you all.